The wind howled across the jagged cliffs of Xiphos 9, carrying the scent of scorched earth and ozone. Beneath a canopy of storm-choked skies, for men lay prone in the dust, bodies still as death. Their rifles rested on bipods, barrels aimed downhill toward the Zorvani encampment sprawled across the valley floor. Sergeant Jacob Hawkeye Miller exhaled slowly, his finger resting lightly on the trigger of his M92 sniper rifle. A relic, according to the enemy. The Zorvani had laughed when they first saw human weapons. Projectile-based, chemically propelled, archaic. Against energy shields and plasma arrays, they were deemed ineffective. Hawkeye planned to prove them wrong. Got movement, murmured Corporal Luis Ghost Alvarez, his spotter. His voice was barely a whisper through the comms. Through his scope, Hawkeye tracked a procession of Zorvani officers moving between command tents, oblivious to the unseen eyes above. The aliens stood over 7 feet tall, exoskeletal armor gleaming under artificial floodlights. They moved with arrogant confidence, a species that had never known true war, only subjugation. "How's the wind?" Hawkeye asked. "4 knots east, shift in 20 seconds, Ghost replied, adjusting his rangefinder. "Temperature drop coming. Might mess with density." Hawkeye made a minute correction, adjusting for air resistance. His rifle was primitive by Zorvani standards, but physics didn't care about alien arrogance. The bullet in his chamber wasn't just lead. It was tungsten-jacketed, designed to punch through armor plating and leave a mess on the other side. "Target locked," he whispered. A pause. His heartbeat slowed, his focus sharpened. A moment of absolute stillness. Then, the rifle cracked. A whisper of kinetic energy, faster than sound. 200 yards below, a Zorvani officer jerked violently backward, his skull erupting in a spray of violet ichor. His elongated body crumpled, eyes wide in disbelief even in death. The encampment erupted in chaos. Hawkeye was already moving. "One down." "Shit, they're scrambling," said Private Deshaun Brick Carter, tightening his grip on his heavy railgun. Looks like they didn't think this was possible. From the valley, the Zorvani barked orders in their guttural language. Floodlights pivoted toward the cliffs, bathing the rocks in an eerie glow. Ghost nudged Hawkeye. "Think they're mad." "Good," Hawkeye said, adjusting his scope. "Let's piss 'em off some more." Lieutenant Thomas Iceman Graves spoke for the first time. "We don't overstay. One more shot, then exfil." His voice was steady, emotionless. Years of West Point training and battlefield experience had turned him into a walking blueprint for discipline. Hawkeye found his next target, a Zorvani technician scrambling to activate the sensor grid. One shot, clean through the chest. The alien staggered before slumping over the console, limbs twitching. Then the real trouble started. A piercing whine filled the air as Zorvani gunships roared to life. From the cliffs, the Marines watched them lift off, sleek silver hulls bristling with plasma cannons. "Ghost, you got interference?" Hawkeye asked, already packing his rifle. Ghost glanced at his handheld scanner. "Jamming fields coming up. We move now, or we're walking blind." Iceman didn't hesitate. "Fall back. No wasted motion." Brick grunted, hoisting his railgun onto his back. "Hope y'all got a plan for dodging death from above." They melted into the darkness, boots silent on the rocky terrain. Behind them, floodlights scoured the cliffs, searching, hunting. The first gunship arced toward their position, its scanning array pulsing like a hungry eye. Hawkeye didn't look back. He already knew the truth. The Zorvani weren't laughing anymore. The cave was damp, the air thick with the scent of wet stone and sweat. Dim red light from a field lamp cast flickering shadows against the walls, where Deadeye Company regrouped, hunched over a holomap. The Zorvani weren't just searching anymore. They were hunting. Hawkeye wiped condensation off his scope, his hands steady despite the exhaustion settling into his bones. They got lazy. Didn't expect a bullet to get through their fancy armor. He glanced at Ghost. How long until they adapt? Ghost tapped at his handheld scanner, scrolling through intercepted signals. Already happening. They're deploying sensor drones, heat tracking, and automated suppression fire. They'll try to flush us out, force us into a kill zone. Brick scoffed, flexing his sore shoulder. Man, I hate when they get smart. Iceman remained silent, eyes locked on the map. He traced a route with his finger, marking potential enemy movements. They don't know exactly where we are yet, but once they get those drones overhead, we lose the element of surprise. We need to hit them again before that happens. Hawkeye nodded. We play this right, they'll be too busy dying to finish adapting. The first move was to neutralize their reliance on sensors. Ghost and Brick worked quickly, rigging an EMP charge near the valley's edge. If their theory held, the Zorvani wouldn't anticipate a localized electromagnetic pulse. Their tech was designed to withstand energy-based warfare, not the brute force disruption of an old-school EMP burst. Minutes later, the charge detonated. From the cave's vantage point, they watched the Zorvani encampment flicker like a dying fire. The floodlights went first, then the sensor grids, leaving the valley in a state of momentary blindness. Hawkeye smirked. Now they're fighting in the dark. Ghost peered through his binoculars. They're scrambling. Looks like they just realized their shiny toys have an off switch. Iceman didn't waste time. Positions. We don't give them a chance to reset. Hawkeye settled into place, lining up a shot before his body even registered the cold stone beneath him. Through his scope, he found a Zorvani officer barking orders, illuminated only by emergency beacons. The alien's frustration was palpable, mandibles clicking in agitation. He squeezed the trigger. The officer's head snapped back, a mist of violet blood catching the faint light. Chaos rippled through the ranks below. Soldiers fumbled for their weapons, their formations breaking apart. Without their automated targeting systems, they were slower, vulnerable. Brick, further down the ridge, opened up with his railgun. The first shot obliterated a weapons cache, sending a fiery shockwave through the base. Zorvani soldiers dove for cover, but cover didn't matter when kinetic rounds punched through walls like wet paper. Ghost called out enemy positions, feeding coordinates as Hawkeye cycled through targets. Every shot was precise, every kill pushing the enemy further into confusion. Then the drones came. From the far end of the valley, sleek metallic forms rose into the sky, unaffected by the EMP. Their targeting arrays glowed red, scanning for movement. A moment later, the cliffs erupted in gunfire. Move, Iceman ordered. The squad scrambled, dodging incoming plasma bursts. The rock behind them exploded, molten debris scattering through the air. The drones were fast, adapting in real time, sweeping the ridgeline with systematic efficiency. Hawkeye ducked behind cover, reloading. We need a new plan. Ghost was already working on it. If we can hijack one, we can feed false data into their system. He pointed toward a fallen Zorvani scout near the wreckage of the weapons cache. That drone over there. Its relay is still intact. Brick cracked his knuckles. You need it in one piece. Ghost shot him a look. Yes. Under covering fire, Ghost sprinted toward the wreckage. Plasma bolts carved the ground around him, but he moved like a shadow, ducking low and weaving through debris. He reached the drone, pried open a panel, and plugged in his scanner. Hawkeye kept the Zorvani pinned, but he could feel them regaining control. Their officers were regrouping, barking new orders. Their chaos wouldn't last much longer. Ghost. Iceman pressed. Almost. Ghost's fingers flew over his device, bypassing the alien firewalls. Got it. The remaining drones hesitated midair. Their targeting matrices flickered. Then, as if suddenly blinded, they shifted fire toward empty space, shooting at phantom enemies that didn't exist. Brick grinned. That's what I'm talking about. Hawkeye took the opportunity. He lined up his rifle, aimed for the highest-ranking officer in sight, and sent another round screaming through the night. The Zorvani commander collapsed, his subordinates hesitating just long enough for the Marines to vanish into the darkness once more. By the time the enemy restored their systems, Deadeye Company was already gone. But the damage was done. The Zorvani had underestimated them. That mistake had cost them lives. And it wouldn't be their last. Rain dripped from the cavern's ceiling in slow, steady beats, the only sound breaking the silence as Deadeye Company caught their breath. They had bloodied the enemy, shattered their arrogance, but the Zorvani were not retreating. If anything, they were evolving. Hawkeye checked his rifle, wiping away the fine layer of moisture forming on the scope. The weapon felt heavier than usual, but he knew it was just the weight of exhaustion pressing on his limbs. Across from him, Ghost sat cross-legged with his scanner, sifting through intercepted comms. His brow furrowed. "They're learning," he muttered. Iceman looked up. "Define learning." Ghost exhaled. "They're shifting tactics. No more relying on sensors alone. They're deploying counter-sniper units, organic spotters, their own marksmen." Hawkeye tightened his grip on his rifle. That changed things. Up until now, they had been fighting an enemy over-reliant on technology, an enemy unprepared for human unpredictability. But now the Zorvani were adapting, watching, hunting them the way they had been hunting the enemy. Brick leaned against the damp rock wall, flexing his fingers over a fresh bandage on his bicep. The wound was shallow, a graze from a drone burst, but it was enough to remind them that the margin for error was razor-thin. "So, what? We just let them track us down?" "Not a chance," Iceman said. He pulled up a rough sketch of the terrain on his wrist display, marking key locations. "We flip this on them. They're expecting us to run. Instead, we make them come to us, on our terms." Hawkeye studied the map. "Decoys," he murmured. Ghost caught on immediately. "Automated sniper nests. We rig up some old rifles, set them to fire in intervals, make it look like we're holed up in different spots." Iceman nodded. "Force them into kill zones while we set up real positions elsewhere." Brick grinned. "Man, I love it when we get mean." They worked quickly, setting up false sniper nests along the ridgeline, propping up dummies with helmets and scrap armor. The automated triggers were crude but effective. Simple timers that would fire off shots every few minutes, drawing enemy attention. Meanwhile, Deadeye Company relocated to a more defensible position, hidden among the jagged crags overlooking the valley. It didn't take long for the Zorvani to bite. Movement flickered in the darkness. Figures slinking through the rain-slicked terrain, their elongated forms barely visible against the rock. They moved cautiously, methodically, no longer charging in blind. Hawkeye peered through his scope and saw one of them halt near a false nest, raising a clawed hand in signal. The alien sniper slithered into position, lining up a shot on what it assumed was a human target. Hawkeye exhaled. He fired first. The Zorvani marksman's skull split apart, violet blood misting the air. His body slumped forward before the others even registered the shot. Then all hell broke loose. Brick opened fire with his railgun, the kinetic blast shattering rock and armor alike. Ghost fed targeting data to the team, tracking enemy movements before they even emerged from cover. Iceman stayed ice calm, calling out adjustments, keeping them disciplined. But the Zorvani weren't breaking. They weren't scattering in confusion this time. They were pressing forward, flanking, forcing Deadeye Company into a fight they couldn't win by positioning alone. A plasma bolt seared the edge of Hawkeye's cover, close enough for him to feel the heat lick at his cheek. He rolled to new position, lined up his shot, and put a round through the chest of another advancing sniper. But for every one they dropped, more emerged, pushing in like an unstoppable tide. "They're not stopping," Ghost muttered. Iceman made a split-second decision. "We fall back, regroup at Point Echo." They moved fast, ducking between rocks, staying low as plasma fire rained down. Brick covered the retreat, his railgun thundering with every shot, slowing the enemy's advance just enough to buy time. They reached the extraction point, a natural choke point between two towering cliff faces, but it wasn't empty. A lone figure stood there, waiting. It was a Zorvani sniper, but unlike the others, this one moved with terrifying precision. His armor was different, sleek, angular, designed for maneuverability rather than brute force. His rifle, an elongated plasma rail, was already aimed. Hawkeye barely had time to react before the first shot screamed toward them. He twisted at the last second, feeling the heat sear past his shoulder, a near-perfect kill shot. He dove into cover, heart pounding. Ghost cursed. "That's no regular sniper." Iceman was already scanning. "I assisted," he said grimly. "This is their answer to us." The Zorvani had built something new, something that wasn't just adapting, but predicting. It had been designed for one purpose, to hunt them down and kill them. And it had just found them. Rain slicked the rock beneath Hawkeye's elbow as he pressed against cover, breath steady despite the chaos. Across the narrow pass, the Zorvani sniper stood like a specter, plasma rifle humming, its barrel shifting ever so slightly, analyzing, predicting, waiting. This wasn't an ordinary enemy. This was something worse. Something built to kill men like him. Iceman's voice crackled through the comms. "We need a plan now." Hawkeye's mind raced. Conventional tactics wouldn't work. This sniper was too fast, too precise. The moment anyone broke cover, they'd be dead before their finger even brushed the trigger. He peeked for half a second, just enough to confirm what his gut already knew. The Zorvani wasn't scanning randomly. It wasn't guessing. It was tracking every possible angle, adjusting in real time, cutting off escape routes before they could even take them. Ghost's voice was low, measured. "It's not just aiming at where we are. It's aiming at where we're going to be." Brick wiped rain from his brow, railgun held tight in his hands. "That's a problem." A plasma bolt slammed into the rock an inch from Hawkeye's head. It hadn't been a random shot. It had been a warning the Zorvani was toying with them. Hawkeye gritted his teeth. "We don't beat this thing by playing its game." Ghost was already working. Its predictive system is built on patterns. We break the pattern. Iceman's response was immediate. "How?" Hawkeye exhaled. Then he smiled. "We make it see something that isn't real." Ghost caught on first. "False movement signatures." "Exactly." Hawkeye tapped his helmet display, pulling up the data Ghost had hijacked from the last drone. "If we can inject noise into its targeting matrix, it'll see threats everywhere." Iceman nodded. "Brick, give us cover fire." "Ghost, get it done." Brick leaned out just long enough to unleash a volley from his railgun. The Zorvani sniper barely flinched, its body twisted in a way that no human could manage, evading the shot with fluid efficiency. But the distraction was enough. Ghost's fingers flew over his device. He tapped into the drone network, feeding false signals into the enemy's visor. To the Zorvani sniper, movement signatures suddenly appeared from every direction, ghostly figures flickering at the edges of its vision. The alien hesitated. It took a half step back. Its rifle twitched from one phantom target to another. Hawkeye moved. He rolled out of cover, rifle coming up in one smooth motion. The Zorvani corrected almost instantly, its plasma rifle shifting toward him. But its hesitation had costed milliseconds. Just enough. Hawkeye fired. The bullet punched clean through the sniper's visor, snapping its head back in a spray of violet. The alien staggered, its body twitching as its rifle slipped from its fingers, clattering against the stone. Then it collapsed, motionless. Silence hung in the air. Brick let out a slow whistle. Damn. Ghost exhaled, shoulders relaxing. I don't think it saw that coming. Iceman stepped forward, nudging the alien's corpse with his boot. They're adapting fast. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Too fast. Hawkeye reloaded, his expression unreadable. Then we just stay ahead. From the valley below, distant alarms began to wail. The Zorvani had lost their sniper, but they weren't done. More forces would be coming, stronger, smarter, angrier. But Deadeye Company would be ready. Hawkeye adjusted his scope, scanning the dark horizon. The war wasn't over. Not yet. And as long as he had bullets left, the Zorvani would keep learning one brutal lesson. Human weapons might be outdated, but in the right hands, they were still the deadliest in the galaxy.